The idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, that if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let him starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Our president today defending his policies at the border and also taking a shot at the prior administration. That as a migrant surge continues and we get new images of life inside some of the shelters. With a near record number of children in custody at the border, the White House finally allowing a press camera inside the facilities where they're being housed. The access limited, the reporter not allowed to speak to any of the 766 teenage boys sheltering inside. And here are the images. Children spotted playing soccer, piles of clothes, waiting for migrants when they enter. An empty classroom, medical clinics, and space set aside for the 108 who tested positive for COVID-19 when they arrived. But this facility in Carrizo Springs, Texas, far different from these images that emerged days earlier. Hundreds of miles away in Donna, Texas, where press are not allowed inside, kids packed closely together, sleeping on mats with foil blankets separated by plastic. This video from Customs and Border Protection, nearly 4,000 in a facility only meant to hold 250. 400 boys inside pods only meant to hold 260 people. And more than 16,000 migrant children in custody crossing the border without a parent or guardian. One thing I found, and it seems I'm not alone, that is being lost often in this politically charged debate over immigration is the fact that this is a sad story about brutal suffering. My next guest, he wrote a piece speaking to that in the Washington Post today with the headline, "The Border Crisis is about human pain and desperation. Why can't the media grasp this?" I want to bring him in now, León Krauze. He's the Post Global Opinions contributing columnist. He's also a Univision anchor based in Los Angeles. León, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing good. A couple years ago, I went along the San Diego-Tijuana border, and I got to see kids and their stories as to why they came, in some cases more than 1,000 miles, what they endured and what they hoped to find. They were in limbo, though, on the Mexican side of the border. I tried, I don't know if I succeeded, to try to explain why they would go on the trip that they did. Take an opportunity to try to explain why a parent would pack a kid up in Guatemala and send them on an extremely dangerous, unknown voyage, sometimes a little kid. Why would they do that? How bad would the situation have to be at home to take that kind of a chance for a child they love?
Terrible. What many people in America don't understand is that for these parents and these children, the alternative is certainly worse. Not only in Central America, where violence has been raging for a long time, where poverty is brutal, where climate change has devastated entire regions, in Guatemala specifically. And then the situation in Mexico can be even worse. The situation in my country of origin, I am a Mexican journalist, is simply brutal for immigrants. So you are talking of a truly hellish kind of scenario for these parents. They risk everything to send their kids, not to find a better life, but just to find a life, the possibility of survival in many cases, because they are threatened by gangs, they are threatened by daily violence, threatened with rape, with sexual slavery, with extortion, kidnapping, and the numbers don't lie, the studies don't lie, and the stories that you heard and I heard in Tijuana and Matamoros and all along the Mexican border, the northern Mexican border and the southern Mexican border as well, the city of Tapachula, for example, they simply don't lie. These are the lives that immigrants are leading.
Oh, León, I'm sure there's folks in the audience, not even bad-hearted people, who say, wait a minute, there'll be any story they'll tell just because they want the golden ticket. They want to be able to come to America. But the stories that stuck with me were kids who said, I didn't even get to say goodbye, because they said I saw something I shouldn't have seen, that they were going to kill my sister or they were going to kill my mother if I stayed, let alone what would happen to them if they didn't join a gang or etc. And then the idea that somehow Mexico is nirvana. I saw kids that were caught up in a sex trade or that were just plucked off the street at one point and they were never to be seen from again. 14, 15-year-old girls. Talk about, if you could, the costs of staying, not just how bad it is, but what they're running from. And then, as you said, it's a life they're looking for, not a perfect one. What are their hopes about what they find if they actually get to America?
I wish that were the case, frankly. I wish that people were making up stories to come and live the life in the United States. That is simply not the case. And that's part of what I argue in my piece for the Washington Post this morning. I think that media in the United States, and frankly in Mexico as well, and in most of the region, are at fault. We simply haven't been able to explain to people what these immigrants are escaping from. And what they're escaping from, in many cases, is, if not certain death, certainly the possibility of losing their lives, or their dignity, or dying in poverty. The combination of factors that people face nowadays in Central America, again, gang violence, poverty, climate change, sexual slavery, that combination of factors just makes it impossible to live, let alone live a peaceful life or a productive one. Just to survive, it's impossible. So when the alternative is either you die or you run the risk of dying or falling into a scenario like the one you've described or I have described as well, or sending your son or your daughter to the United States to find a relative and maybe survive, it's frankly a no-brainer. And I think you would do the same. I would do the same. And the people who are listening to this show right now would probably do the same when faced with those two alternatives.
I said to me, it wouldn't even be a hard choice. And it would be hard to say goodbye to my child. But if I love my kid and I wanted what's best, it's not a jump ball. But what's the answer, though, Leon? Because there will not be a policy in this government that any kid who shows up at the border will get open arms. To that end, is it to try to improve the situation, in Guatemala and Salvador and Honduras, or do you set certain parameters? Who gets to not only that gets here, who gets to stay? What's the answer?
That should not be the policy. Certainly, not every child, not every minor who comes to the United States should be allowed to stay in the United States. This idea that people like me who argue for humane treatment of refugees and immigrants are suggesting open borders is just nonsense. We are just asking, I would argue, and not only us as journalists, but the immigrants themselves are asking for a humane system of immigration in the United States, something very, very different from what we saw in the past 4 years of the Trump administration. Other than that, the solution lies in the countries of origin. And the Biden administration, again, contrary to what the Trump administration did, is suggesting investing $4 billion over the next 4 years in the northern triangle of Central America. This is Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The difference that that kind of money, and not even that kind of money, amounts much less money than that. The difference that could make for example, farmers in the western highlands of Guatemala who have been brutally affected, yes, by violence, but also by climate change and poverty. The difference that a few $100,000 could make is immense. So the solution is there. But in the meantime, I think that the solution is also a humane immigration policy and also investment in Mexico. Mexico has to do much more. The current government, the current administration in Mexico has cut funding for shelters. Shelter infrastructure in Mexico is simply non-existent. The United States could do something about that, like the European Union did with Turkey with the Syrian refugee crisis. That sort of cooperation, regional cooperation, is what eventually will fix this dire situation.
Well, it was a really interesting and important perspective I saw in your piece today. Leon, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And when we come back, folks, we take a look at, unfortunately, a segment that we have no shortage of content for. We call it So Right, They're Wrong. Republicans who now say they're party of law and order, but they're refusing to honor Capitol police officers who protected them on January 6th, saving their lives, some even giving theirs in the process to do so. We're going to show you who these lawmakers are, and we'll call them out.